Good evening. Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Wood again. This time we're talking about public goods, common pool resources, and artificially scarce goods. We are going to discuss the characteristics of goods, and we'll talk about the effectiveness of markets at delivering types of goods, the various types of goods. And then we'll talk about public policy and public goods, common pool goods, and artificially scarce goods. So, we begin with, it says, the characteristics of goods. We differentiate goods on two characteristics called rivalry and excludability. And these attributes define what type of good we're dealing with. Rivalry exists when goods can only be consumed by one person. That is, you as an agent have rivalrous consumption where you are the only agent who gets to consume this good. Here I go. Rivalry, all mine. So non-rivalry is when lots of people consume the good at the same time. For instance, if we all go out and drive on I-275, we can consume that good all at the same time simultaneously. Or there are, F-22 fighter jets in Alaska, keeping the Russians from penetrating our airspace. We're all consuming those F-22s all at the exact same time. The other is excludability. Excludability is when a firm can force you as a consumer to pay in order to enjoy the good. So this was exclusive in that I exchanged money for that good or service. The no free ads, right? Grocer from whom I purchased it. They made me pay money in order to get that beverage. Non-excludability is when you cannot be precluded from consuming the good. So many of us have probably not paid a whole lot of taxes when we are undergrads in an intro course. And so if you've never paid for an F-22 fighter jet, that's a non-exclusive good in that you are consuming it regardless if you ever paid for it. You don't have to pay in order to be protected by it. And you can go drive on the streets on I-275 without ever having had to pay for them through your taxes. So what that means is we have four possible combinations. We have the intersection of excludability and rivalries, where we can have goods be both, either, or none. When goods are rival and excludable, we have private goods. And we've spent the vast majority of this semester talking about private goods. Goods that are rival and excludable. Goods that are all yours and you can be forced to pay in order to get it. So I've got restaurant meals here, right? You buy a restaurant meal, that's all yours, and you have to pay to get it. That is a private good, and it's what we've been talking about all semester long. And markets do for the most part, pretty great job at delivering rival and excludable private goods. But there are three other ways that we can go. We could have goods that are excludable and non-rival. These goods are called artificially scarce goods or club goods. These are goods that we can consume simultaneously, but are forced to pay for them. Think Netflix. We can all get on Netflix at the same time and enjoy it, but we all have to pay our $9.99 or $12.99 or whatever it is a month in order to get on the Netflix. Traditionally, this was stuff like private clubs or toll roads. It was called club goods or club theory. But artificially scarce goods are much more prevalent now when we are streaming things and using cellular networks and so on. Goods can be non-excludable and rival. These are common pool resources or common pool goods. This is when you have rivalry over a good, that is, it's just for one individual agent, but no one can be precluded from participating. So think about fish in an open access fishery in the ocean. Every fisher person can go fishing. I think I 2020 that, hashtag I'm woke, right? Every fisher person can go fish in the ocean. But everybody can only catch that one fish. That one fish belongs to only one fisher person who catches it. But everybody can go fish at once. What's that going to do? What if we have a public forest where everyone can go cut trees? Only you, as a lumberjack logger, can cut down a tree. Yes. But everybody can go in there and cut down trees. So what are you going to try and do? Interesting. Then there are public goods. This is the intersection of non-rivalry and non-excludability. These are goods that we consume simultaneously, in a sense, and we can consume them without paying for them. The fire department, they're protecting all of us all the time, and whether you are a taxpayer or not, when you call 911, the fire department will come and save your cat from the tree. Y'all thought I was going to be way darker with that example, but it was just an adorable cat in a very pretty live oak aesthetic tree. So here are, for your next two slides, some ways for you to check yourself. We've got private goods, artificially scarce goods, common pool goods, and public goods. And I will say that, these categorizations are not black and white, and we can have some goods that, kind of run between the two, but we should learn these as it is pedagogically sound to understand what they are. Why, Dr. Wood? What's the point of this? And how in the world does this relate to what we've been studying all semester long? And who cares? Why does this matter? Well, we have studied the market all semester long, and dare I say, I have tried to create a place where we worship the market, right, as the most productive way that our species has figured out to engage in productive activities. The thing about that, though, is that private goods are the only goods that are efficiently delivered by markets. We've spent a whole semester looking at basically one type of good that markets do a really good job at delivering. There's three other types of goods. Yes, microeconomics goes very deep. We only get a chance to really touch on these other three types, but people will spend many years of a career studying the other three types of goods. So why don't these other three types work so great in a market setting? Well, with a public good, they're going to be underproduced. If we have non-excludability and non-rivalry, that is, we can all consume it at the same time, and firms can't force anybody to pay for the good, what firm is going to produce the good? It's going to be underproduced. It's absolutely going to be underproduced when who is going to voluntarily pay for something that they don't have to pay for? Very few people. So what firm is going to want to participate in a market where no one will pay them? So in the market setting, these goods don't get produced enough. With common pool goods, they get over-consumed. If we have non-excludability and we have rivalry, right, every tree, every fish, they belong to the one person who goes out and grabs them or produces them, essentially, right? So if you're producing that fish for sale on the market, and there's an open access fishery where anyone can go fish for it, what are you going to do? You're going to catch as many fish as you can because everyone else is fishing there too. You're not thinking about what you're doing to the fish. You're going to produce as many as possible, and these goods will get overconsumed in a market setting. We're going to clear cut the forests, and our sushi habits will drive a species to extinction. And now, this one's less obvious, so I'll model it for you at the end. But with an artificially scarce good, these actually get underconsumed. So they're a very interesting case, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about them. We'll talk about them at the end. So only private goods are rival and excludable, and therefore efficiently delivered by markets. We need rivalry and excludability. Rivalry forces consumers to pay a positive price. Excludability induces firms to produce the good. When there's rivalry, you'll pay for it because you own it and it's all yours. You don't have to share. Excludability, firms can make you pay to get it so that you can have it. That is going to give them an incentive to participate in the market as they try to maximize profits. So let's look at each under turn to see why, again, public goods are underproduced, common pool resources are overconsumed, and artificially scarce goods are underconsumed. And then we're going to talk public policy and consider what a regulator can do in order to deliver an efficient outcome. Okay? Okay. Great. So let's start by focusing on public goods. Public goods are non-rival and non-excludable. We've got things listed here like military, an education system, group working classes. And as I said, these are underproduced. Why? Again, the non-excludability and non-rivalry matter. If you had to give the good you produce to everyone, regardless if they pay or not, would you bother to produce the good? And with non-rivalry, how can you charge a consumer when others enjoy the benefits at the same time? I'm not going to pay for something that isn't mine and that I don't own. This is why in this class there are not group projects. There's no group work because I understand what's called the free rider problem. Economic agents are not willing to pay for a non-excludable good, and they'll use it for free. So what happens in group projects? Does anybody love group projects? Not me. I hate them. Who hates them? That's all me. Why? Because in school, I was the nerd who did all the work, and other people were free riders. They would just do all the work, and I'm sure you're sitting there going like, yeah, I was that guy too, or girl, or whatever I am. I was that. And some other people are like, yeah, you got me an A. Right? So a couple people might like it. But for the most part, I hate group work because it opens us up to the free rider problem. Somebody doing all the work and other people just free riding along, using something for free that is non-excludable good. And that's why we don't have group work in this class. Okay. So if this is something that won't be provided, right? Think about if there is no government. If there is no government, who is going to provide a military and an interstate highway system and a public education system? How do we get those things? Is someone going to voluntarily go like, well, I'm going to consume this at the same time as everybody else, and nobody will voluntarily pay for this because we all own it in common and it's also not excludable. So yeah, I'm just going to produce a bunch of the stuff that isn't even mine, right? That doesn't happen. When it comes to a military, you get a couple of warlords. The rest of us would serve in that army, I guess. These little private armies that fight each other. With, schools and roads, you get way too few of them. There's just no incentive to produce something that you can't get paid to produce. It doesn't make sense for anybody to be producing the optimal amount of this. So how do we get it done? How about private donations? Will a public university take a donation from an alumnus or an alumna? Yes, absolutely. My alma mater definitely sends me literature with forms that say, check 200, 150. Check one of those and send us a check. But do donations keep public universities running efficiently? No, they do not, right? They get paid for through government funding and through, paying the tax that is your tuition. Private donations can help, but they do not deliver an efficient amount of the good. If we suddenly stop government funding to public universities, they will shut down. They can't just run on private donations, right? So, if firms won't voluntarily do this because there's no incentive to participate, and if private donations won't generate enough revenue to run a public good. It leaves us to the government. So a government must decide if it should provide a public good, and then it must decide how much of the public good to provide. In order to determine the optimal amount of the public good, we have to set the marginal social benefit equal to the marginal cost. That will help us determine the efficient amount of quantity to produce. We are very familiar with marginal cost at this point, I hope. It's just the additional cost to produce additional units. And because we're making an actual good here, we're just talking marginal cost. It's the cost to produce each next unit of the military equipment, or the university, or the road, or the fire department. Whatever it is, it's a thing we create as a public good. But marginal social benefit is you can kind of think of it as society's demand curve. It's the sum of all the individual marginal benefits enjoyed by consumers of the good at one quantity. Now, this is the opposite of the way we solved for our demand curve with private goods. If you recall way back in supply and demand, when we derived a market demand curve, we took all the individuals at every price and added them up to see what the quantity is that was demanded at a particular price. The demand curve was linking together that downward sloping curve between every price and a quantity demanded pair. Here, we're going to look at each quantity. We're going to vertically stack people's marginal benefit to getting that quantity of the public good and seeing what that marginal benefit is, because that is how much we value that good. We stack that all up, we sum it up, we get a vertical sum that's called the marginal social benefit. So instead of adding horizontally, we're going to add vertically, because people won't pay, they won't reveal what their willingness to pay is for this public good that's non-rival and non-excludable. So we sum up everybody's individual marginal benefits to get a vertical sum to equal the marginal social benefit from producing each additional unit as we go. And then we use tax revenue to purchase the public good, where the marginal social benefit is set equal to the marginal cost of production. So we are now solving a marginal social benefit, looking at what is the value of this public good to all of society. We want to get the biggest possible total benefit to society from having the public good compared to the cost of production. And so to do that, we set the marginal social benefit equal to the marginal cost. So let's do a graphical example. We're going to ask, should we produce F-35 fighter jets? And if so, how many? So go ahead and have a pause here and copy this chart down. Okay, I've got a table here for us that you've copied down with our number of F-35 fighter jets from 1 to 7. And then I've got some marginal benefits for, let's say there's 3 people in society. If it's easier, you could think about the poorest third, the middle third, the richest third. Let's say we have 3 people in society with different individual marginal benefits for F-35 fighter jets protecting the country. Then there's a marginal social benefit, which we'll calculate. And then there's a marginal cost. Let's say that's $154 million. Let's, for the sake of simplicity, let's just have our marginal costs be a constant 154 million, that each next unit costs 154 to produce for, is that Lockheed? Okay. The issue with this is because of non-rivalry and non-excludability, no one is going to voluntarily pay their marginal benefit for the good because, right, it's non-rival, we can all use it at the same time and it's not just mine, and it's not excludable, I can use it without paying for it. So why am I going to pay for something I don't have to? So in order to see how much of this society would optimally want, we need to calculate the marginal social benefits. Again, when we calculated demand, when we derived a market demand curve, we started at a price and we added everybody up horizontally. started at some price and added horizontally to get a coin demanded. And when we did that for every price and paired it with every quantity demanded, we had a demand curve. But here we can't do that. Instead, we're going to start at a quantity and we're going to add our way up vertically. We're going to stack these marginal benefits on top of each other and solve the marginal social benefit. So let's say that one fighter jet, person 1 values the first fighter jet at 30 million, person 2 at 70 million, and person 3 at 200 million. All we need to do is add those together, stack them on top of each other vertically, and to see that at one fighter jet, the marginal social benefit to society is $300 million. So now we'll work our way through the chart doing just that. We go 25 plus 60 plus 175 is 260. Then we'll go 20 plus 50 plus 150 is 220. Then we'll go 15 plus 40 plus 125 is 180. Then we'll go 10 plus 30 plus 100 is 140. And then 5 plus 20 plus 75 is 100. And 0 plus 10 plus 50 is 60. So that's how we get our marginal social benefit curve. And as we're dealing with making an optimal decision, we have to think marginally. To get the biggest total benefit from F-35s possible relative to the costs of producing them, we need to set our marginal social benefits equal to our marginal social costs. So what we're going to figure is as we go down each quantity looking at how much to produce, we'll keep producing so long as the marginal social benefit is greater than or equal to the marginal social cost. And what we never want to have happen is our marginal cost exceed our marginal social benefit. So what this tells us is that for our society, it's going to be optimal for us to produce 4 F-35 fighter jets. So let's model this so that we can visualize what a public goods problem looks like. So to do that, I'm going to now stack up each additional person's marginal benefit on top of the other. I'm going to start with person 1 here and their marginal benefit. So one fighter jet, person 1 has a marginal benefit of, we said millions of dollars, so I'll just put 30 here, keep things as clean as possible. Right? Person 1 values that first fighter jet at 30 million. They value the second one at 25 million. The third one at 20 million. The fourth one at 15 million. The fifth one at 10 million. The sixth one at 5 million. And the seventh one at 0 million. It's probably easier for me to just put 5 right there. Okay? That's person 1's marginal benefit that they're not going to pay unless they are going to be compelled to do so by government through taxes. Now, person 2, made them green, so let's grab a green marker. And we're going to now stack person 2 on top of person 1 so we can start to build up society's demand curve for this public good of F-35 fighter jets. So let's take, we've got person 1 already, and let's start adding on top of him. So what are we going to do? We are now going to, actually, let me pause this real quick.
My mom's calling. Hang on a second.
All right, I'm back. Sorry. Shout out to my mom. She's the tops. Thanks for always waiting outside my piano lessons and stuff. If you ever watch this, Mom, you're the best. Dad, you're cool too. Everybody, go tell somebody you love them. Okay, let's get back to this. We were stacking marginal benefits, and now we're going to add person 2 on top of person 1. So at one fighter jet, we had person 1 with 30 million, and now we're going to add person 2 on top of that. So I've got 30 plus 70, right? That's going to give us a total of 100 million in society at that point. Then we're going to go, and on top of 25 million at quantity 2, we're going to add 60 million, and so that will be 85 million. Let's see, where's 75? About 85 right there. Cool. Very cool. Now we're going to, on top of 20, add 50, and that will give us 70 million. And then we will add 40 on top of 15 for 55. Then at 5, we'll add 30 on top of 10. That will give us 40. Should be about there. That's 40. Then we will add 20 on top of 5. So that should give us 25. And then finally, we'll add 10 on top of 0. And that will give us 10. So now we're vertically stacking people's additional benefits that they get from each additional fighter jet being produced and put into operation to protect us. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to finish this calculation. We need to stack person 3 on top of persons 1 and 2. So let's get purple, my favorite of the colors we marker with. And so now we've had 30 plus 70 being 100. We're going to add that 200 on top. To get us our marginal social benefit total of 300 million. Then we're going to add 175 on top of our 85. And that gives us 260. Then we're going to add 150 on top of our 70. That gives us 220. Next, we're going to add 125 on top of our 55, and that gives us 180. Then we will add 100 on top of 40, so that gives us 140. I can do that arithmetic. Then we'll add 75 on top of 25. That gives us 100. And then we'll add 50 on top of 10, and that will give us 60, our marginal social benefit. So what we've done here essentially is we've vertically stacked what our value for each quantity is. So we've, again, rotated. No longer at every price are we adding up the quantity. At every quantity, we're adding up the marginal benefits that we can't get people to voluntarily contribute to a non-rival, non-excludable good. So what do? We add them up at every quantity. We add them up at every quantity so that we can calculate our marginal social benefit, our MSB there. That is the marginal social benefit curve and how it's derived. I wouldn't necessarily make you derive this process every time I have you draw it, but I want you to understand where it comes from when you do draw a downward sloping marginal social benefit curve. Now, when we use this to make optimal decisions, we need not just the marginal social benefit, but the marginal cost. So for simplicity again in this question, I've got our marginal cost curve to produce each fighter jet constant at 154 million. Okay, so usually they're upward sloping, but I figured there's enough going on in this graph. Let's have this be simple. All right, so the question begins. What would happen in a market outcome? What is going to transpire in a market outcome? How many fighter jets do you think we'll get in an unregulated market situation, no government? Well, I can tell you what it is. Q market is 0. We are not going to get F-35s without a government doing it. That's just the situation when you're dealing with non-rival, non-excludable goods. So, what does that mean for society? It means we don't get any total benefits from having this good, but there are benefits from having this good, obviously. In a market outcome, are we efficient? Well, we need to measure and see how we're doing with our marginal analysis. Here, my marginal social benefits. Are $300 million. So we get $300 million from producing an additional fighter jet. It says marginal social benefits market, $300 million. What are my marginal costs in the market outcome? My marginal costs in the market outcome are $154 million. So, is that efficient? When my marginal social benefits are greater than my marginal costs? Absolutely not. This is an inefficient outcome. When marginal doesn't equal marginal, we are not getting the biggest total benefits we can compared to total costs. So, Q is too low, and this is inefficient. People value this good, but there's no incentive for anyone to produce it. It's just not going to exist. So society is worse off. So in order to create this good, what do we need to do? We need to sum up people's marginal benefits and generate tax dollars and consume this good collectively by a government purchasing it. So in the market outcome, we try to find where marginal social benefits equal marginal costs. Here, the last place where our marginal social benefit is greater than or equal to our marginal cost is at 4. So our Q regulated, the Q that the government provides, would be 4 fighter jets. And at 4, what do we have here? We have a marginal social benefit in the regulated outcome equal to 180, and a marginal cost in the regulated outcome that's constant, still 154. So this is the closest we can get without our marginal cost exceeding our marginal social benefits. So the quantity of 4, what do we get? The optimal production. So what are we looking for in a regulated outcome? We want our marginal social benefits to equal our marginal costs. We never want our marginal cost to be higher than our marginal social benefits if they can't exactly equal. Here, our quantity is optimal. What do we call it? We call it, shout out Dr. Beekman again, Q baby bear, because it's
Just right.
This is efficiency. Baby bears are adorable and efficient. We have the optimal amount of the public good being produced. All right. So our marginal benefit, our marginal cost analysis is incredibly important. I turned cost and benefit backwards there the way I like them. Our marginal benefit, marginal cost analysis is incredibly important. Determining our individual marginal benefit and therefore our marginal social benefit is difficult as we try to stack up our individual marginal benefits. Yes, that is a difficult calculation to make. This is a difficult job for a government. People prefer more to less, and they rarely think of the optimal trade-offs when they make difficult policy decisions. And so when it comes to producing something like an F-35 or any public good, politicians will often come out and say, we're going to make 17,000 billion of these. And it's that number that actually gets generated is usually less because there's opportunity costs. We need to also provide roads and educations and all sorts of other things as a society. So someone has to do the difficult work of calculating the marginal social benefits and the marginal costs in order to yield an optimal outcome for society. This is difficult work, but that's why we do economics, because it makes the world a better place when we do it the right way. So you might reflect to yourselves about public goods. Education, healthcare, roads, are these public goods? Again, I said sometimes some of these things fall on a spectrum between private and public, where some societies choose to treat some of these goods as private or public, depending on where you're at, right? We have public education, we'll treat it as a public good. But if you look at the United States versus, say, Denmark or Norway, they treat higher education and healthcare as public goods, and we do not. So you as an individual and as someone who has learned something in this class may want to reflect on what you think about what is a private good versus a public good. As well as that when we do have private goods, they're efficient when there's many firms and no externalities. Let me erase the board and we'll start talking about common pool resources. Now let's talk about common pool resources or common pool goods. These are non-excludable and non-excludable but rival. And for examples, I've got grazing land in the West, fisheries, biodiversity, clean water, timber. This is when the good itself is specific to one individual and competitive over that one good, but it's not excludable in that anybody has access to that good without paying to get it. So when it comes to things like timber or fisheries, I'm going to use grazing in the land as our example in a moment. You can go run your boat on the ocean, or you can go out and try and cut down trees. If it's open access and everyone has access to it, there is going to be a competition to catching every fish and cutting every tree. So with non-excludability, we can't stop anyone from consuming. With rivalry, there's a rush to be the one who consumes it, who gets it. And so what that means is this good will be overconsumed. If it's just open season on this thing and it's going to get destroyed. That's basically what we're going to talk about here. This good's going to get destroyed, and we call it the tragedy of the commons. I don't want to repeat myself, so I'll just get straight to it. It's the tragedy of the commons. This is when the individual consumes the good where their own individual marginal benefits and equal marginal cost, and they don't consider the impact of their action on all of society. So you're only thinking, I want that fish, I want that tree. If I don't get it, someone else will. But when everyone does that collectively, there's going to be damage to that resource. We're going to cut every tree and drive the fish to extinction. If no one can be prevented from using the good, but only one can consume it, people essentially use the good as fast as they can. So an example here is like when you live in a communal situation, like you might in college. I lived in a house with 7 other guys for a couple years in college, and I had much better beer than they did. And so when I would go to, write music and practice piano and go to the library or whatever, what would happen when I was gone? That beer got drank, right? And what was left? Your Keystone Ice, your Natty Ice, and the stuff that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot marker, Lego marker that I've fashioned into a beer poking stick for some reason. All right. I think I'm going mad with this distancing thing going on here. Anyway, they would drink my beer. I had friends in, not econ, in English and so on, who would live in a commune in college. And they described when, the food would come in and, we don't have any property rights. Everything's shared. Everything belongs to everybody. And I'd say, well, what happened when the food got delivered? Oh, everyone ran and grabbed cheese. Everyone ran and grabbed chocolate, right? Yeah, because we are a tragedy of the commons species. If everything is up for grabs and only one of us can get it, what are we going to do? Someone's going to go grab it. Someone's absolutely going to go grab it. So let's use an example of grazing land in the Mountain West. Let's draw a graph and model the common pool resource. This model is going to share some features with our modeling of externalities. I'll call this common pool good, and I will put, let's put price and cost on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. And so let's say that's like, since we're talking about grazing, I'll put quantity of cattle there. So what we're going to see here, I'll make this bigger in just a sec, don't worry, is that when the individual rancher looks at how many cattle to run, they're only going to think of their private costs and their private benefits. The supply curve itself is going to be the sum of the individual ranchers running cattle without considering their impact on society. That is, you're going to think about how your costs and benefits affect your behavior. But with a common pool good, we will also model a marginal social cost that incorporates and adds to not just that we have to, there's costs associated with cattle, there's costs associated with cattle on the resource, and that is they degrade the common pool good. That is the land. There's damage to all of society here. So let's look at this and see what happens. So when it comes to our good here, there will be a downward sloping demand curve. It's the quantity of cattle we run on the land. And what are we going to do to the land? There's going to be a supply marginal cost curve. And there's going to also be a marginal social cost curve that's going to be being ignored. Now, in a private outcome, if the government's not involved in this, cattle on land here. We're talking about the land. What are we going to do? Well, if I'm an individual rancher, I'm going to look at my marginal benefits that are yielded from the cattle and the marginal costs associated with running the cattle. And so what will I do? I'll set the two equal. And what do we see at the market level? We see a price and a quantity. Whereas consumers of beef here, we can, get some cheap beef and get a lot of it. But is this efficient? What are we doing? If we don't consider how many cows to run on the land, what are we going to do? We're going to put all the cows we can on there because we don't bear the cost as individual ranchers. It's not my problem if the resource gets destroyed. If I don't run my cows there, somebody else will, and they're going to make a buck, and I'm not going to feed my family. What am I going to do? I'm going to do what's optimal for me. That is, my decision does not include marginal social costs. The marginal social costs in the market are much higher than the price, which is also our what? Our marginal benefits. Price is marginal benefits, right? It tells us the benefit we get at the margin from consuming the next unit of the good. So in the market outcome here, what do we get? The marginal social cost is greater than the marginal benefit. What does that mean? It means that the price we're paying is too low. What we are doing is imposing costs on the land itself. We are imposing costs on the resource. We are not considering how our behavior will denigrate the land and essentially destroy it across time as, we have way too many cows on this land that can't support it. So, in a common pool good situation, in the market outcome, marginal will not equal marginal. The Q will be too high, the P will be too low, and our whole problem will be inefficient. We will clear cut the forest. We'll destroy the grazing land. We'll drive the fish to extinction. We will hunt the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger until they're gone. And, I'm using a historical example so we don't have to be sad about elephants and rhinoceroses that we're doing that too right now. All right. Okay. So as we see in the market outcome, too much quantity is consumed at too low of a price. This indeed feels like externalities because marginal social costs are being ignored. So how can we fix it? Well, solutions to the common pool resource include Pigouvian taxes. We can use a Pigouvian tax here to get an optimal amount of the common pool good being transacted. How does that work? What we need to do is, for a Pigouvian tax to be efficient, set our marginal benefits equal to our marginal social cost in this particular model. So my marginal benefits, of course, are given by the demand curve. And so this will be the price of the regulated outcome. It's the marginal benefit, regulated. We need to set that equal to the marginal social costs. That is, this is our Pigouvian tax. Basically, you have to pay a fee for each cow for it to run on the land, in this case. There'd be a tax, which would say, if you want to use this common pool good, you have to pay this amount in order for that to happen. So are you going to run cows there? Well, so long as the marginal benefit to doing so is greater than or equal to the marginal social cost, yeah, we will. And what will we get? You will get a smaller quantity being transacted, being used. So we will internalize the marginal social costs that we are imposing on the common pool good, and we will basically prevent the fishery or forest or grazing land from being destroyed or the species being driven to extinction. So in a regulated outcome, what do we get? We get our marginal benefits equaling our marginal social costs. Our quantity is now optimal. Let's give a shout out to Baby Bear again. This is the optimal just right quantity. You get efficiency because marginal now equals marginal. We get the biggest total benefit relative to to total social cost of the resource, and we won't destroy it. We could also use tradable licenses. These have been used in fisheries. You give each fisher person a license, and they can use that to bring in a fish, or they can trade it with others in the industry and by selling them. And so you can trade licenses. And it's important that Q regulated is the total number of licenses that are provided to be traded. Another option is to assign property rights if it's feasible. This is hard to do in the ocean, but if it was, say, some tracts of land, we could break those up and make them private and sell them off. If that is done, the owner has an incentive to protect their resource. If this is the difference between how you treat your car or your apartment versus a rental car or a hotel room, right? Which do you take better care of? The one that's yours, right? And so if it's possible to make this private, we can essentially make people treat it like it's a private good, and markets do a pretty good job of allocating the right amount of a good when it comes to market outcomes if we have a private good, as we've seen all semester. There's been other things that have happened. We've had nonprofit groups essentially pay ranchers to not run their cattle in the West, and the current political administration has been dismantling things that have basically paid ranchers to not run their cattle on certain public lands. But we can talk about that on our office hours if you like. Let me get the board cleaned up again, and we will talk about artificially scarce goods. Let's talk artificially scarce goods. Artificially scarce goods are excludable and non-rival, meaning excludable, we have to pay in order to get the good, and non-rival, meaning we can consume them simultaneously. And these are also called club goods because, private golf clubs, toll roads used to be the primary examples for this, but now software, streaming services, satellite TV, cell phone networks, these are things we can consume at the same time, but you have to pay in order to have access to them. These goods get underconsumed. That might not seem as intuitive right away as, public goods won't get made, and common pool goods will just be gobbled up and destroyed. With excludability, firms preclude people who don't pay from consuming. With non-rivalry, one person's consumption doesn't preclude others from consuming the good too. So how does that result in underconsumption? So here's a paper by some guy, Wood. I don't know who that is. No one's heard of him. In the International Review of Economics Education in 2017. And this is a model with 3 outcomes that I'd like to work through with you so that you can understand a club good or an artificially scarce good. These, in most principles textbooks, just get kind of like, yeah, those exist too. But I think these have gotten really important in the last decade to 2 decades as streaming services and things that are exclusive and non-rival have become huge parts of our lives. So I wrote a paper on how to look at this at the principles level. So let's look at this model. And the next couple of slides are explanations of what I'm about to do. So let's start with our 2-dimensional model we've been using all semester. I'm going to put prices, revenues, and costs on our y-axis and quantities on our x-axis. And let's title it Artificially Scarce Good. You can think of getting a movie off of cable or direct TV. You can think of cell phone network, Hulu, whatever it is that makes this relevant to you. Now, when it comes to, say, getting a movie off of DirecTV or HBO or any of these goods, Netflix, are these perfectly competitive markets? No, of course not. These are firms that have some influence over price. Of course, Netflix has, slowly increased the prices of its subscription services across time. And have we all stopped from having Netflix? Of course not. So what that means is they have a downward sloping demand curve at the firm level. So let's draw one. And when demand is downward sloping, we all know marginal revenue is downward sloping and below demand. Now, in the short run, there's something unique and interesting here. How much does it cost Netflix if you subscribe? If you are the marginal user, what is their marginal cost of offering their service to you? What is Verizon's marginal cost of you saying, I want to be a subscriber? Or if you get a movie from DirecTV, what are these marginal costs? They're essentially zero. For you to click subscribe, the good is already produced, right? It's all fixed costs, upfront production. And the good is just sitting there for you to say, I want it or I don't want it. So what that means is we've got a weird situation here in which the marginal cost curve is not increasing, but is constant, and is constant at zero. In the short run, given sufficient capacity, the marginal cost supply curve is zero. Marginal cost supply is equal to zero, just tracing along the x-axis here, our quantity axis. So what does that mean for our average total cost curve? Will it have our traditional U-shape? Will it ever go back up? It won't. It is only going to have the spreading effect. There will be no diminishing marginal returns effect. what we will have happen here is our average total cost curve will only decline. Our average total cost curve will only decline. It will actually just asymptotically approach the x-axis as our quantity gets large, right? If I kept this quantity axis going here, average total costs would never go back up. They would just get closer and closer and closer and closer to the x-axis without ever touching it. Okay. So what are we going to observe happening here? If there is no government whatsoever, what will this firm do? Obviously, what will it do? It will set its marginal revenue equal to its marginal cost. This is the market outcome. It will set its marginal revenue equal to its marginal cost. How will it choose its price? It's going to go up to the demand curve and hang a left, just like we've learned when we studied oligopolistic, monopolistically competitive, and monopolistic companies. So go up to the demand curve and hang a left, and you'll see price market. Price market. Is the firm making a profit? Well, what's our formula for profit again? Price minus average total cost, all times quantity. Indeed. So, if I use my optimal quantity and find my average total costs, hang a left and measure those. And we see what? Profits are to be had in the market outcome. There's a per unit profit of price minus average cost, and it is made Q market number of times. Okay, is this efficient? Absolutely not. Why? Because look, there is a lot of deadweight loss. Supply and demand are equal over here, and so conceptually, we are missing a whole lot of mutually beneficial transactions. So a lot of deadweight loss. It's this triangle from Q market all the way to this point. So what if we wanted to have an efficient outcome to eliminate deadweight loss? There are two types of efficiency at the market or at the firm level that we need to concern ourselves with: productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. If you recall, productive efficiency is when minimum cost output level, when your average total costs are minimized, is the same as the profit maximizing choice. Well, clearly the profit maximizing choice is not minimizing our average costs of production. In fact, productive efficiency is impossible because average total costs will never have a minimum. They'll only just approach zero. They'll never reach zero, and they'll never turn back up. Let's do the short run here. So, what can we do? Allocative efficiency is when the marginal benefit, the price consumers pay, of the good is equal to the marginal cost of production. We can do that because that's setting supply equal to demand. That's right here. I'll call that Q allocative efficiency. Q allocative efficiency. Now, the problem with this quantity, while it does eliminate this deadweight loss if we force the firm to produce here, what would they do with the good? In order to get there, they'd have to give the good away for free. Because at Q allocative efficiency, our demand curve, our price, is 0. Our price allocative efficiency equals 0. Firms don't go into business to give their good or service away. So, this is problematic, especially because they had to spend a whole ton of money to start up to create this big artificially scarce good that we could all just subscribe to. So they've got to pay those fixed costs at some point. How would they observe this as far as their profits go? If I go from my allocatively efficient outcome up to my average total cost curve and measure that, my allocative efficiency, average total costs are higher than the price. So what does that mean? If average cost is higher than price, the firm is making a negative profit. So this is I'll write it across here. A loss in the allocatively efficient outcome. I'm losing average total cost minus price for this many units. That is one big rectangle of driving this firm out of business. So if we impose efficient policy here, we will destroy the company. This is a quirky situation. This is a quirky situation in which if we try to be efficient, we will actually destroy the company. The only way to pay for this would be to subsidize them with tax dollars, and nobody wants the government to be going, hey Netflix, give everyone Netflix for free, we'll pay you to produce. So, if the market outcome results in a lot of deadweight loss for cable TV or for whatever this is, and policy that forces efficiency would destroy the company, the best that a regulator could do in this scenario is what's called the second best solution. We call it second best because first best destroys the firm. The second best solution is when demand is set equal to average total costs. The regulator sets the demand equal to the average total costs. Why? Well, at this point, when price second best equals average total cost second best, my profits will be what? They equal 0, right? Because price minus average cost is 0 times up to this quantity. And that is a rectangle with only one side. So one side times 0 is 0. We get quantity second best generated. This is the second best solution because what does it do? It minimizes the deadweight loss right here. We get deadweight loss, this triangle, to be as small as possible. This minimizes deadweight loss. The second best solution, when demand equals average total cost, minimizes deadweight loss. It induces the firm to produce and earn 0 economic profits. Their normal returns, again, this can be accounting profits, including opportunity costs, such that the most consumers can get the good without driving the firm out of business. This will generate the biggest possible consumer surplus and total surplus that we can get without imposing a loss on the firm and either driving them out of business or having to subsidize them with tax dollars that could be put to some better use or not collected in the first place. So that is the joy of the second best solution. There is, of course, a third best solution, a fourth best solution, a 10th best solution. Anywhere along the demand curve, from the second best solution to the private solution, is an improvement because it will reduce deadweight loss and improve total surplus for society. Awesome. So, again, private goods are efficiently delivered in unregulated markets so long as there are not externalities and there is not market power. So if there's not negative spillovers or pollution, and we've got a lot of firms, markets efficiently deliver private goods. And we've learned how to deal with externalities and monopolies if they're around. Public goods are underproduced in an unregulated market setting, and we need a government to calculate where marginal social benefits equal marginal cost and produce the optimal amount of the public good. Common pool resources get overconsumed in an unregulated market setting. We need a government to force people to internalize the marginal social cost of their action so that we don't destroy the resource and the optimal amount is consumed. And with artificially scarce goods, these get artificially underconsumed. Because, why? They're inefficiently underconsumed because being efficient destroys the firm. So it has to be either Q market or Q second best or something in between. And both of those are inefficiently low in terms of consumption. To be efficient, we'd have to be at Q second, or sorry, to be efficient, we'd have to be at Q allocatively efficient. And because that imposed a loss on the firm, it would destroy them. So the good has to be logically, therefore, underconsumed. Thank you. Have a lovely day, and I'll talk to you soon.